The Spinoff Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spinoff's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Although you may not know it, if you're a good Kiwi, you're interacting with today's guest's company's app many times a day, every day. Rush are the makers of the COVID app, brought to market in crisis response speed and iterated and improved on to the point that it's been adopted by the NHS in the UK and it's in use in both New Zealand and the Cook Islands. It's not unusual for Rush to have their work overseas. They count Google, Disney Plus and Microsoft as customers for their digital and technology offering. Their CEO, Pavan Vyas, has grown the company fourfold to nearly 100 in the team. He joined from a background in Big Four consulting, venture investing and study at Oxford University. To talk the journey, international success and what's next, CEO Pavan Vyas joins us now. Tēnā koe, thank you for being here.
Kia ora, great to be here.
Hey, so take me back. How did you first get in to the technology world?
So we've got to go back right into the 1990s, and being an immigrant into New Zealand in the early 90s, I was quite a insular, almost isolated person, and the experience was, in the 90s when there were not many immigrants around, it was quite isolating. So what my parents decided to do is get my sister and I a computer in 1994. I still remember it as if it was yesterday. It was a little PC Direct Dream Machine 3. I think it cost an arm and a leg for the time. They spent $3,000 on it and they said, here you go use it. And of course, there were no manuals. There wasn't the internet or social media to enable a young child to use a computer. So I just started making friends at school, which liked computers, and that became my little social circle around gaming, around building computers, around swapping content on floppy disks. So that was quite a interesting way to make friends. And clearly, as a typical brown parent does, hey, what medical school are you going to go to, Pavan? And I said, well, actually, I want to become a computer programmer. And my parents were initially taken aback by it. You're the first person in the family who doesn't want to be a doctor or something. So that's cool. And just so happens I studied doubly hard at school to get into university. And I was in Auckland University's second ever computer systems engineering intake. And that's where it all started seriously for me. And I started sort of coding seriously and applying to internships around the world as I progressed through uni. And that's actually how I got my start in tech, and lived through it. I lived through the dot-com bubble and burst cycle during and slightly after university, and I loved every moment of it.
And like, this is not to make you sound like a really old guy, because you're not a really old guy, but what was it like being in the heady days of the dot-com boom? Like right now when people go, oh, the market's overvalued and it's nuts. Right now, the average price to earnings ratio on the S&P 500 is about 30. In the dot-com bubble, it was about 200. So 5 times as crazy as today for some kind of reference. But what was it like being in such an exciting world and being a technologist?
It was absolutely crazy. I remember joining a family-funded startup as employee number 1 straight out of uni called Photo Junction. And this is around a time where professional photographers were picking up digital cameras and shooting weddings and portraits for the first time. They had no idea how to run their studio using digital, right? So we had this software product which we were trying to sell for $150 a year globally, and we ramped up to thousands of customers that were using our product. And what was it like? One day randomly, the CEO of the company got a call from Apple, and they say, "Hey, we've been tracking your stuff, and we're coming up with a new operating system, and we want to back your technology." So we got flown up to Cupertino and introduced to Apple, and it was just crazy, right? Just going through that experience. And even back then, New Zealand companies were challenged to play on the global scale. We just didn't have the funding and the ecosystem down here to enable those sorts of partnerships to kind of really flourish. So I wish almost the dot-com bubble happened when New Zealand tech had a bit more maturity, because 2 or 3 generations of startups later, we would have been a different scale tech ecosystem if that were true.
Yeah, with all that capital washing around, being able to, yes, even if everything blew up, it left kind of the foundations for everything that came after, didn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, it changed people's mindsets around technology in the ecosystems, which ended up taking a bit of a punt on this stuff. I feel New Zealand wasn't brave enough back then because the markets were still assessed from a let's keep a local perspective versus actually what can you achieve on a global scale. And that's only just started to happen in the last sort of 10 years.
Oh boy, 5 years ago, if you asked a business expert what they thought about Xero, they'd tell you it was mad that it was losing money. The general kind of voice in the media. Once things are successes, people take it all as for granted, don't they? But it's been a hard run. And tell me about the choice that you made when the next financial crash happened after the dot-com boom, the GFC happened. What was your choice to go back and study?
Yeah, so interesting story. After Photo Junction, I was around my mid-20s, and by that time in my life, particularly growing up, in pre-teen years, I'd visited about 30-odd countries with my family. And I had this itch, like I had to go for a global career. So my wife and I, we packed our bags and took a one-way flight to Europe. And we landed right in the middle of the financial boom in the mid-2000s in London. And it was silly money being thrown at technology in London within banks and wider financial services. And I kind of rode that wave in terms of understanding the language of business and understanding how technology is delivered at scale within enterprise. And then the GFC started happening, and I had clients such as Citigroup, Bank of Scotland, and a couple of other mid-tier English firms. And the best of them needed government funding, and 2 of them actually stopped trading. And that was, a baptism of fire. I really kind of understood how fragile these ecosystems are. And at that point in time, I started thinking about actually what I want to do with my life long term. And blending technology with business was something that I really wanted to do. So I went to Oxford, got a MBA, 1-year intense business degree, and to this day in my career, it's been the best year of my business life, actually. It was a fantastic experience, and I learned a lot from other students and the wider Oxford ecosystem.
What was it like? The phrases in the language like, you can bank on it. The idea of banks as being especially the biggest banks with hundreds of years of history behind them in the UK. The idea is that they can't fail and that they're the most stable things there are. And what was it like to be working for them and then to be having a front seat to this financial crisis that was so centred in the banking system?
Simon, was very elitist. Actually, the British banking circle was very old boys club, very networked, and it was really difficult to break into those traditions. And what I loved about the GFC is even the playing field and the boom that we're seeing in neobanks and customer-led financial institutions is actually fantastic. That's not perfect, but it actually has shown the world that, power to the people. And I remember vividly coming out of Oxford and joining Deloitte. Some of my colleagues were starting to work with a new bank called Metrobank. And Metrobank had been, at that point in time, the newest entrant into the British banking market for around 100 or so years. Mm-hmm. And the UK hadn't given out a new banking license for about 100 years. And in the last 10 years, they've had actually given out tons of banking license. And, those startups really shook the ecosystem, and better for it.
That elitism in the city and the financial world and banking and stuff, jumping out of that into Oxford. What was the Oxford experience like doing an MBA there? As from far away, you get these ideas of rowing and toffs and Brideshead Revisited or something. What's it like now?
It hasn't changed much, to be honest. So one of the reasons I chose Oxford is I wanted a bubble to escape in, and a bubble that would allow me to just concentrate on figuring out where the world's going and what my role in that world should be. And Oxford is great. I did all those stereotypical things like, rode for my college, which was one of the third oldest colleges in Oxford, as well as, took every opportunity to put a black tie and a white tie on at times. So that was fantastic. But I think what sets Oxford apart, even today, is the research that they do and the thought process the university does is, what's going to happen in the next 100 to 1,000 years, and how do you set up students to think about that world right now? And that's absolutely what the Said Business School is all about. They have a philosophy where business is for betterment of society and humanity. So how do you blend concepts like social enterprise together with traditional banking and consulting fields to make businesses of the future more resilient to the waves that are going to happen in society?
And then you jumped into Deloitte, as you said, one of the big four kind of firms, and consulted around the world to do exactly that, to help businesses face those challenges of the future. What's it like being a consultant working in one of those environments?
It's a pretty massive learning experience. I hadn't had any business consulting experience before, and then I was, shoved into the Deloitte experience, and I allowed myself to do that. And the first year was really tough. You had to go on planes to visit customers that were facing into some pretty sheer problems post-GFC, and they were trying to figure out how to reconfigure their businesses to survive and thrive post-GFC. But what I really enjoyed about the consulting environment is you have the opportunity to look at every problem using first principles. And as an engineer, I was quite good at doing that already, albeit I had to kind of use the language of business. And I think it's the first time in my career I really saw the power of diversity within Deloitte in London particularly. And that diversity, when you assemble it, actually can think about some amazing problems. Problems like the largest bank in the UK was working with us to figure out what happens if the next crisis comes and the bank becomes insolvent. How do you still keep trading so that there isn't a run on the bank, for example? And those kind of problems needed quite novel solutions that we thought about and advised these companies, particularly well. And coming to New Zealand, what I really enjoyed is New Zealand business is a lot more generic compared to larger markets. So you'll find CEOs of New Zealand companies move around industry sectors quite easily. And it's because we have a mindset around leadership, and we don't lock ourselves into any particular corner. So as a consultant in New Zealand, it allowed me to really experience a wide array of problems, everything from understanding how a fisheries industry works, and also I was one of the handful of people that helped take NovaPay out of the news back in 2013, whilst advising a top 4 bank in New Zealand what their 2020 strategy might be. So it was quite a bit of diverse experience, and consulting, I'm quite thankful I spent almost 5 years in it, because it allowed me to be quite flexible in the variety of problems that face up into business today.
Yeah, and it's such a privilege to get to kind of, spend some time in an industry and learn about how it works, and kind of almost be a tourist in another person's world for a while as a consultant, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that idea of like, how do you stop people doing runs on banks? It's kind of like the visceral problem of capitalism, isn't it? How do you keep the confidence up? As it's all just shared confidence that keeps the system going.
Absolutely.
Hey, so and then back in New Zealand, and moving into venture picking is really interesting. What got you into working with Sky and investing in ventures for them?
So I started working with Sky around a time where it was quite evident what was happening globally. It's just those waves hadn't hit New Zealand. So Netflix wasn't in New Zealand yet. NZME hadn't gotten into video. Things like Lightbox from Spark weren't launched. And, Sky still had a very traditional set-top box business. And when their executive team reached out and say, hey, would you want to join the company, because we've got a lot of media people, but not many people from outside who can actually look at the company critically. So soon after I joined, I was fortunate enough to go to the Silicon Valley and LA with most of the board and some of the management team of Sky. And it was fascinating. That one trip over a week opened a lot of eyes and ears around the Sky executive team. And then when we came back, we started having some radically honest conversations about what might happen to Sky New Zealand and what some of the defense mechanisms would be. And I personally was really passionate about, and still am passionate about, large New Zealand companies needing to develop global business models, beyond New Zealand, because otherwise the clock is ticking. So one of my passions, which was technology startups, I convinced the board of Sky to say, okay, let's start investing in early stage media tech businesses. And the question shouldn't be, what can they do for Sky? The question should be, what can Sky do for those companies? So one day there's a media tech ecosystem which is global, in which Sky is playing from New Zealand. And we had some fantastic opportunities to invest in some really amazing models, both here and globally. And it was one of those points in my career where I made up my mind that I want to go work in a tech business one day, and the opportunity came sooner rather than later.
And what was it that attracted you to Rush, which at that stage when you got involved was quite a small agency, 20-odd people, and working on kind of digital and gaming projects is where it had come from. What did you see as the opportunity there, having been working in very senior roles in very big businesses?
Yeah, it's a good point. So by this time, I'd worked for bulge bracket banks through to being employee number one in a startup is how I started my career. So I had experienced that entire spectrum. And when I met some of the tech teams, including Danu, our founder and CTO, it became evident what special talent Rush had in terms of engineering. From my engineering days, I could absolutely pick really good engineering talent. And it was almost like the company was solving some really interesting technical problems, but those problems weren't solving the right business or societal problem. So I joined Rush with a vision to help aim it towards some really big global problems that might come up from time to time. And of course, to do that, an organization needed a few more capabilities, right? So the first couple of years at Rush, we just got relentlessly focused on reconfiguring the business for that and adding to the great engineering talent other skill sets such as amazing customer experience design and UX UI, as well as product mindsets. And the rest is history. And that's what's enabled us to grow so quickly over the years is the relevance we bring to our customers who are thinking about reimagining their business with the use of technology.
And with websites and, people's online or companies' online presence now being the first interaction for most people with a company. People don't necessarily go walking through shops. They have their first experience through Instagram, for example, or they don't ring up a customer service person, they jump on the website. That digital offering must be so key to, every business's future plans. How do you, when you're talking to businesses about their future plans, sell to them from New Zealand? You've got people like, Microsoft and Disney Plus and Google on your books. And, how do you talk to these people who are the leaders of what they do in the world and get them on board as a smaller company from New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And sometimes it's not one thing. So what we've developed over the years is a really fantastic reputation, particularly for projects which are about blending the physical world with the digital world and using things like cameras to understand how the world or what the world is around a particular setting, or using really bleeding edge technologies like VR in 2013-14 and AR well before things like Pokemon Go came to market. So within those large organizations and networks, the reputation that the company has been fantastic, and a large part of our business is about word of mouth, as well as us over the last few years really investing in the brand and the value proposition and getting invited to global industry events that we quite often speak to and feature at.
Tell me about the COVID app project, as that must have been, a big thing to be able to step in and do to help everyone in the spirit of everyone pulling together to combat COVID. But also a huge undertaking. I mean, I think a lot of people look at an app and they just see kind of the front end and a couple of screens and go, it can't be that hard. But what do you have to actually take into account when you're making a piece of critical health infrastructure that is designed to be used multiple times a day by 5 million people all at once?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I guess to kind of dive a bit deeper, the reason we got involved in thinking about how do we solve the problems which might eventuate when COVID finally comes to New Zealand was because of our purpose statement. We're a very purpose-led company. Our purpose statement is we design technology to better serve humankind. And when places like Wuhan and Italy in the early days started going into lockdown, we started thinking about how can technology potentially solve this problem. And we developed a whole bunch of prototypes, including testing and tracing technologies, as well as business continuity platforms, particularly designed for the pandemic, or the pandemic that wasn't there yet. And that took a lot of guts from us, right? We basically told a bunch of people in the company, hey, stop doing what you're doing, apologized to those customers that we were slowing down, and ring-fenced our teams to start working on this problem. So to answer your question, the unintended consequences of the technology you build, you sometimes don't find out until the technology's out there at scale. We were lucky in that we started thinking about this stuff well in advance of New Zealand going into lockdown and well in advance of New Zealand getting its first case. So by the time we had these prototypes and the country went into lockdown, we could actually test it and really understand through human-centered design and those kind of techniques what people care about and what were people really worried about. So things like trust and privacy and security were first-class citizens in everything that we designed. So, if everyone that hopefully uses the COVID Tracer app on a daily basis is scanning the QR code, that only is possible if they feel and know that their data is secure on their device. Yet, if there's an outbreak which they're part of, they can share that data for the betterment of the entire country. And to design a platform that can work like that at scale was a monumental effort by the team which designed it and built it.
And so when you decided to kind of get ahead of the game, you saw the problem coming and you wanted to do your bit to start solving it. Did you just do that on your own as a business before talking to the government, or how did you go about that? Did you take them something that was pretty much done and go, hey, you should do this? How does that work?
We knew that it would be really difficult to convince the New Zealand government that we were onto something if we didn't have anything to show them. So we put in way more effort to ensure that the prototypes that we had developed were really polished and were scalable, so that by the time all the technology professionals within government got to look at what we've done, we had that sense of credibility. And not only that, we could demonstrate all the public health experts that we had spoken with, not just in New Zealand, but in places like UK and in some cases, even some places that had gone into lockdown well before, to give evidence that we've actually built this thing by doing a whole bunch of research. And research when the pandemic is only a few weeks old was, I think, what set our solution apart compared to some other things that were out there.
And so there was a chance that no one would have picked it up.
Absolutely.
That the COVID card that was being talked about might be the solution, and that it might have just been a skunkworks project at Rush that never made the light of day. But instead, it ended up becoming the solution here and being picked up by the NHS. How did that feel?
Yeah, that's one of the proudest moments in my life for sure. So the NHS had invested, tens of millions of pounds in an app which was all about centralizing citizen data to track COVID, and that got thrown out because of public outcry up there in June of 2020, and then we got a cold call from the Department of Health and Social Care, which is NHS parent body, to jump on a call. And the strategy they were going to take is now lift and shift the best-of-breed solutions from around the world. And they also wanted to implement QR code technology, which is decentralized in the UK. And New Zealand had successfully evaded further lockdowns and mass community spread, so they were happy to go with New Zealand tech because it was proven that it works. And it was a matter of weeks that we delivered the solution up there. And earlier this year, in 2021, we received a call again from the NHS, and it was the Alan Turing Research Institute, which had verified that our technology had helped save, I think it was 600,000 infections in the UK, which probably meant around 6,000 lives saved, given the ratios. So it makes me immensely proud with the work that we did, not just in New Zealand, but in the UK.
That's so cool. And what kind of platform does that give you for, I mean, you've built the company to be 100-odd people now, and, it's been a growth journey over the last kind of 5 years. And that idea you had from the beginning to solve some global problems from New Zealand with this company, what kind of platform does this adoption by the NHS and this success at scale give you?
Yeah, it opens up a world of possibilities. And one of the things we need to get really good at is to be a bit more focused in the things that we choose to do. So we're looking at a number of possibilities. One is to, whilst we've been doing amazing projects for the likes of Microsoft, Disney, and the health systems, we've been also investing majority of our free cash flow in this platform, which we're calling Our Vision. And it's a platform that we have designed to make computer vision really, really easy to do, and then create amazing custom experiences off the back of that. Things like pay-by-plate parking, or saving and tracking and saving Maui dolphins, of which there are only 63 up and down the coast of New Zealand. So one opportunity that we're looking quite seriously at is to scale this technology out and aim it at really large, globally relevant problems, as well as open up rush in offshore markets as and when we are in the mid to later stages of the pandemic. We believe that we've only just begun. We're still a small and ambitious New Zealand company, and we would love to be named alongside the likes of Xero and Rand one day, to those companies that have achieved the goal of positively impacting millions and tens of millions of people around the globe every day.
Tell me about your personal mission around helping move the country more generally to a knowledge economy.
Yeah, so going back to the start, if I hadn't had access to a computer early in my life, I probably wouldn't have taken a software and technology route, right? And it's been an absolute privilege and a leveler to do the work that I've been doing over the last 20 odd years. So I want that opportunity to be given to all New Zealanders, right? And if you look at countries generally, the top two industries in every country actually benefit the whole country, and then it's a bit of a long tail. And technology is probably number 3 at the moment compared to our larger agri and primary industries. So my mission is to make sure the whole country benefits from New Zealand being a knowledge economy. And so what I do with Rush is effectively in the middle of the bell curve. And what I do in my spare time, when I do have spare time, is work on the edges of that bell curve, right? So I spend a lot of time in the early stage startup ecosystem, working with, advising, and in some cases being on the board of early stage tech companies to help them get access to capital as well as talent. And then also I'm starting to spend a lot more time in the other side of the spectrum, where technology is not even distributed evenly. So one of the organizations that I'm on the board of is an organization called Take Two, and it's all about teaching students in the prison system how to develop software, and how do you scale that out so that when these people come out, they and their whānaus and their communities benefit from it. So really it's the mission around exporting knowledge versus exporting just goods. And when you export knowledge, the advantage you have is you can choose where you play, versus when you export goods, you can't necessarily always choose who the buyer is.
Yeah. Or you get into mad situations like you export raw logs and then have to wait to import them back in as timber you can use, and you get into the spot that we're in as a silly old country.
Exactly right.
Yeah, bananas. And as a kind of final thought, you've had a year of, in amongst some very hard times of the pandemic, but of real global impact, amazing success on some measures. What will success be for Rush, and also what will success be for you personally?
Yeah, so we always talk about, how many lives have we impacted positively in the last 12 months. And in the last 12 months, that number's, tens of millions. So our number one objective in the company is to get it to 50 million positively impacted lives in the next 12 months, and then beyond that, hundreds of millions. So that's how ultimately we'll measure our success as a company. And for me, it's about getting myself to a place where I can actually really spread the impact that I'd like to make on this country and globally. So more meatier problems to solve would be fantastic.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story today. Lovely to chat to you. That's CEO of Rush, Pavan Vyas. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Jonathan Pierce for producing, and thank you very much for having us along and listening. Cheers.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound, and brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.